Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Ignorant Intellectual on Media. I'm your host, Scott, and today I thought we'd do our fifth episode of my CD library. We're slowly getting through it. We're still on the first big box that had a bunch of letters C, and now we're on B, and it still has the A's and the numbers to get through, but we're doing it. Today we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 CDs to go through, but it shouldn't be very difficult because there's a bunch of CDs by the same artist a few times in this. So we're full in on the B's now. We've put the C's behind us until probably the next box that we go through because that will have the C's on the bottoms and the D's and the E's and the F's kind of thing, right? So I don't know if you watched the first video in the series, but basically I've boxed up all my CDs in order to make room on the shelves for more of my movie collection, which is on the floor. Since I don't use the CDs, I basically transfer them digitally onto flash drives and listen to them off the flash drive. I don't actually use the CDs, so I can box them after I've transferred them, and if I need to, I can go back into the boxes and find them. Basically, I know where each CD is because they're all alphabetical order. Although when you put them in the box, you kind of put them backwards because you're putting the A's at the bottom, then you're stacking, the B's and the C's on top. Anyways, that's why we're going through them pretty much alphabetically, but kind of alphabetically in groups. And this group is from the numbers to most of the C's. All right, so numbers A, B, and most of the C's. So right now we're on the B's. All right, so let's get to it. Um, the first group I'd like to introduce you to, if you haven't heard before, is Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians. I have their two albums, all right, which are Shooting Rubber Bands at the Stars, which is that one, and this one is Ghost of a Dog. Now, they've only had two albums, okay, and these are the two. It's basically Edie Brickell is the leader of the group. They kind of play a folk type of rock mostly. Um, Out of the two albums, they're both great. This one probably has their most celebrated song, which is called "What I Am." What I am is what I am, and what you know that song. I don't know. Did I just infringe on their copyright? I'm not sure. I hope not. Anyway, so that's the song. That's the first song on this album. So this was their first album, and this was their second album. This one came out in 1988, and this one came out in 1990. And basically, they did two albums, and then they kind of split up. So if you like kind of like folk, alt rock, with that kind of bohemian type of, because they're the new bohemians, that bohemian type of, aesthetic, uh, ideology kind of thing, and they're singing. It's 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 beautiful music, and I really enjoy it, and that's why I got both of their albums back in the day, and I still have them now, right? So anyway, so if you like that type of music, Edie Brickell is one of the good ones in that kind of style, that folk rock style. All right, so that's Edie Brickell. All right, next up is Billy Bragg, and it's funny because I have not listened to Billy Bragg at all. All right, and I have one, two, three, four, and five of his albums. Okay, so we have go through these. All right, so we have Don't Try This at Home, which was the first album I got from them. All right, from him, and that's his sixth album. It came out in 1991. We have um, Talking to the Tax Man About Poetry. All right, and that's his third album, and that came out in 1986. Okay, all right. Then we have Workers' Playtime, which came out in 1988, and is his fourth album. All right. Then we have William Blake. All right, which is his seventh album, came out in 1996. Okay. And then we have this one, which is called Back to Basics. All right. And this one is basically almost like a triple album, actually. It's like his first two albums, which were called Life's a Riot with Spy versus Spy and uh, Brewing Up with Billy Bragg. The first one came out in 1987, and it was his first album. And his second album was Brewing It Up with Billy Bragg. And then this also has its first EP from 1985, which is called Between the Wars. All right, so it's basically three albums, two his first two albums and an EP that he did as well, which was called again Between the Wars, all on one album. All right, so his first second album, Talking to the Taxman, which is his third, Workers' Playtime, which is his fourth, Don't Try This at Home, which is his sixth. So I don't have his fifth album. And then William Blake is his seventh. So I have all of his albums except for his fifth, going up to his seventh and his first EP. Now I have not listened to any of these. These are on a flash drive that I haven't come to yet. Like I have like 12 flash drives full of like 32 gigabytes of music, so hundreds of albums on each of the flash drive, each of those flash drives. So when I get to them, they're all probably on one flash drive and all recorded at the same time. When I come to that flash drive, I'll end up hearing all, you know, six of these albums or whatever, right? So, and the EP. Have you listened to Billy Bragg? What do you think of him? He's kind of like alt folk, alt rock kind of thing, that kind of thing. Um, what do you think about? Is he good? Hopefully, because when I bought these, I bought them all at once, all, you know, five of the CDs or whatever, all at once, because he has a good reputation of being a great musician. So when I hear him, I'll know or not whether I like him or not. All right, so that is Billy Bragg. What do you think of Billy Bragg? Okay. Next up is Boxcar Willie. And basically, this is a compilation album called King of the Freight Train. And, you know, it's kind of like hobo music, country hobo type of music. Um, and I haven't listened to this album, but I kind of like old style country. So maybe I was thinking maybe I would like this as well. So I picked up this one because you can't really find his albums, Boxcar Willie's albums at all. All right. So you're kind of, if I mean, you may be able to find them on LP somewhere if you really look. Maybe go on Discogs or whatever. But on a CD, which is the medium that I prefer, this is the only thing I've found by him in all the time that I've been collecting music over the last 30 years or whatever, right? Um, so we'll listen to that once I come to it, all right? And then up next is Boxcar Racer, and they've only had one album. Basically, this is Blink 182 with less of a pop sound and more of a, you know, darker kind of lyrics and music, right? So the main band, like two of the main members of Blink 182 created this, but they kind of did one album and then I guess they got it out of their system. And I think maybe years later they ended up maybe doing a second album. I'm not sure, but this is the only album uh, that they did during the Blink 182 time. Um, and it's supposed to be kind of like a darker style of punk rock, right? So rather than that pop punk type of thing, I haven't listened to it yet, so we'll see. There's so many of the albums that I have not listened to because there's so much of it. I collected it. Now I'm going to listen to it all, right? So after I put it on the flash drive, but I think I'm only on the second flash drive that I had because there's so many albums on it. I'll listen to it and then I'll listen to it again maybe if I like the overall music that was on those hundreds of albums on that flash drive. So I'm on the second one right now and I'm listening to it. So, and I got now three albums by David Bowie. All right. Basically, it's two compilation albums. This is probably one of his most famous compilation albums, which is called Changes Bowie. All right. So it has like Oddity, Changes, Iggy Stardust, Suffragette City. You know, all a lot of his good songs. It's probably his most popular best of, I guess you'd call Changes. Um, and then we have David Bowie's Fame and Fashion, which is also his all-time greatest hits. Now this has 12 of his songs on it. Space Oddity again, Changes, Starman, 1984, Young Americans Fame, Golden Years, and so on and so forth. Um, I just picked it up. I like his regular albums, but sometimes you just want all of his hits and listen to that, right? So So when I get in the mood for that, that's why I picked that one up. And this one, all right, which is his 21st studio album, and it's called Earthlings, Earthling, and it came out in 1997. I have not listened to it. All right. Basically, when I decide I'm in a mood for Bowie, I will listen to, I don't know, like, well, the one I grew up on is probably Let's Dance, all right, and Space Oddity, right? So, um, the albums that you really want to listen to by David Bowie are, like Hunky Dory, Ziggy Stardust, which is probably his greatest album in my opinion, Station to Station, and then Let's Dance, which is probably his most popular album, which came out in 1983. All right, so this is all 70s music. That was his heyday, was in the 70s, and then probably Let's Dance, which came out in '83, was his more mainstream popular album. Not that anything by David Bowie is not popular, because it is, but Let's Dance was just huge in the early '80s. Like when I was in high school, everybody listened to that album. Um, but his '70s stuff is probably his best stuff, and then Let's Dance, most commercial, and then after that, you're a fan, so you listen to him and you think all this stuff is good. Like this one here is kind of a whole bunch of mix of influence, like industrial, drum and bass, techno, and a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So it's interesting to listen to it, but his '70s stuff is his best easily, right? So if you haven't listened to any of David Bowie stuff, start with his '70s stuff, go all the way up to Let's Dance, absorb that, and then move on to his post '70s stuff and see what you think about it. All right, so in the previous I think episode 4 of this ongoing CD reviews, I did Kate Bush, right? I did a bunch of her albums earlier, but I still got two of her albums here. All right, or three of them actually, I think. Yeah, three of them. All right, so um, I have her 1989 album, The Sensual World, which is basically her '80s stuff. Is probably her best stuff. All right, so you want to listen to her '80s, like late '70s, early '80s up to this album is all great stuff by Kate Bush. Um, but I also got the director's cut, which is basically this album and the Red Shoes, which came out in '93. It's this album and Red Shoes, which I don't have the album. So this one came out in 2011. It's basically a remix of four of the songs off of this one, and then some songs off of Red Shoes. All right, and it's supposed to be pretty good, but I haven't listened to it yet. Now it's one of those digipacks, so I have it in plastic because it's all paper, right? So it's called Director's Cut, and it's basically a remix album of the albums The Sensual World and Red Shoes. All right, so and then this album. So she had put out, maybe it was Red Shoes was the last one. Anyways, she hadn't put out an album like in like 12 years. All right. So this is her eighth, but her seventh album, yeah, was Red Shoes, and it was in 1993. And this one came out in 2005. So it was like 12 years between albums. And this one blew everybody away. It was like a tour de force of Kate Bush coming back into music. And I mean, it was like everybody loved this album, from the critics to everybody that listened to it. Basically, it's a double album. It's two CDs. The first CD, so she named the two CDs. The first CD she named A Sea of Honey, and the second CD she named A Sky of Honey. And now A Sea of Honey contains like seven songs, and they're more of the singles version of her music. So the singles that were pulled off of this came off the first CD, and then the second CD is more of like a compilation type of style of music, right? And it has 9 songs on it, and it's more of like a concept album. All right, so you really get two albums on here rather than one, two CDs. So after you've listened to her '80s stuff, well, her best album is probably, what do you think it is? Is it The Sensual World? No, I think it's Hounds of Love is probably your best album. It came out in '84 or '85. It's called Hounds of Love. So maybe start with Hounds of Love, then listen to her other '70s and '80s stuff. Her first album is really good as well. Um, uh, and uh, and then jump up to this one. So after you listen to, let's say, listen to this one, all right, The Sensual World, which is the end of her '80s stuff, if I remember correctly. Um, Listen to her '70s and '80s stuff, and then jump up to this 2005 album, and you'll be blown away again. It's an extremely good album. It's called Ariel. All right. So that's Kate Bush. Next up, we have Burial, which I know nothing about, and this is their second album or his second album. He's like a remix of electronic remix, or I don't know. He puts all this stuff together. Electronics, electronics music. He's out of London, like East London. I know that, and his name is Burial. Well, his stage name is Burial, and he does these mix-ups, um, like kind of like industrial electronic music. Um, anyway, so this is his second. I think he's only had two albums, but don't quote me on that. This one is the second, and he had a first one that was really good. But this one, I think, is uh, critics consider it his best music. But if you haven't tried Burial, let me know if you have. What you think of him? Is he worth a listen? He's going to be on one of the flash drives that I listen to. I'll see what he. I really love electronic music though. It's I love electronic music. I really love punk and garage music, and I like jazz, uh, especially jazz with a really good female lead singer. So vocal jazz with a female rather than a male. Otherwise, I just prefer jazz that has that has no singing at all on it, right? So I'm looking forward to listen to this. I haven't heard it yet. It came out in 2007, and it's basically Burial's second album. All right. Next up is Built to Spill. Now, I did another album of theirs in a previous video uh, of this in this series, and so they're an indie rock band from Boise, Idaho, and I have not listened to them. But this one is their second album. All right, so it's called "There's Nothing Wrong with Love." All right. Um, have you heard this album? Have you heard this band? What do you think of this band? Let me know. All right. And now, also on that previous video where I did Built to Spill, I also did an Ottawa, Canada musician called Jim Bryson. He's probably over the last 25 years, probably um, other than Alanis Morissette, he's probably Ottawa's best musician. I mean, there are some other indie musicians, but like ones that aren't household names. Jim Bryson is one of the best from Ottawa. And this is his third album. It's called Where the Bungalows Roam, and probably the best song on this album is number three, which is Pissing on Everything. It's a really good album. I really enjoyed that when I listened to this album a few times. That Pissing on Everything kind of stood out. But if you can find it, anyways, all right. So this was put out on Kelp Records, which is Kelp. Kelp is a local Ottawa record label. They put out maybe 75 albums altogether, but they haven't put anything out since the mid 2000s, if I remember correctly. Um, but a lot of the best Ottawa music was put out on Kelp Records. If you can find anything by Kelp, you'll probably enjoy that record label. All right, there's the logo for them if you can see it right there. All right, so it's Jim Bryson, Where the Bungalows Roam. So all right, so that's Jim Bryson, one of Ottawa's greatest independent singer-songwriters. If you like mid-level vocals, kind of a mellow flow to his music, but not really slow. It's kind of mid-level tempo as well, and a mid-level voice, and mostly a guitar-led music. You'll like him, all right? So this album is called David Thomas Broughton. It's his first album. I have not listened to this album. Have you? All right. So this came out in 2005, and basically he's kind of like a folk musician, singer-songwriter guy. That, from my understanding, now there's one, two, three, four. There's five songs on this album. All right, and basically it's him jamming. Uh, from my understanding, what attracted me to this is to listen to it as a curiosity in a way, because he just sits down and he plays a lot of his music. From my understanding, he'll play himself, so he'll play the different instruments and then mix it all together and put it together. But this one is basically him going into the studio, starting and then playing, and then just going through the whole album. No cuts, no nothing, just one one take, whole album. All right, and I'd like to hear what that sounds like. Right, so it was done in a church, if I remember correctly. So you'll hear the church bells in it. From my understanding, when I was reading some stuff on this album, because I haven't listened to it, like I said, you'll hear church bells in it in the background or something, because he recorded it in a church, one take, all one shot. Right, so it might be interesting to listen to. We'll see. David Thomas Brighton, Broughton, and that's what attracted me to this album. Why I picked it up. All right. So the next and the last are Broken Social Scene. All right. So I have two of their albums, basically their second and third. So their third album is this one, which is a self-titled album. Their second album is this one, which is called You Forgot It in People. Now, Broken Social Scene are basically they're a band, but they're also basically like a collective. Like so many of they're centered in Toronto. All right. Now, Toronto originally was more of a business capital and government capital, because the provincial government buildings are the provincial government is basically in Toronto for Ontario, and the business center of Canada is in Toronto as well. So they're called Beantown and other words, which basically there is no culture there. At least that's what people thought originally, right? It's all business and government, right? So um, but what's happened is there's been a flourish of culture in Toronto, and especially at the turn of the millennium, right, in the 2000s, Broken Social Scene came out and basically took over the world. I mean, they're known internationally, they're known domestically, uh, and there's so many musicians that have sprung out of Broken Social Scene on other projects. Like you have Metric, you have Jason Collette, you have Amy Milan, you have who else? Emily Haynes, all right, who's the lead singer of Metric. Feist is another one that came out of Broken Social Scene. So there's like a big collective of musicians in Toronto that all come together in Broken Social Scene, and members go from 6 to 19, from my understanding. I think the most they ever had in the band was 19, and the least was 6. But there's a core of 2 or 3 guys that are in the band full time, and then all these other people come and join them, right? And probably their best album is this one, all right, which is their second album. And basically, how do you describe their music? Baroque pop. You name an instrument, it's in their music at some point, and they basically influence Canadian music to such an extent that many of the band members that have gone. So it's like when you name Canadian music, a lot of them have touched Broken Social Scene, and internationally they become famous as well. And when people outside of Canada think of Canadian music over the last 20, 25 years, a lot of that is coming out of Toronto and coming out of Broken Social Scene. So if you're going to want to listen to music, post 2000 music, this is one of the bands that you should be listening to. All right, so it's called Broken Social Scene. 2002, You Forgot It in People, and 2005's self-titled album. All right, it's some stunning stuff. All right. So that's it. That's all 21 of the CDs that I've done um, for this episode 5 of my CD library, and we'll do episode 6 soon. And thank you for watching. What did you think of what I show you? Have you listened to Billy Bragg? Have you listened to any of the other artists that I've mentioned? What do you think of them? Am I going to enjoy Billy Bragg when I listen to him? Broken Social Scene, probably the greatest band to come out of Canadian band in post 2000, right? So Kate Bush, you should listen to Kate Bush if you haven't. Anyway, so I'm just rambling on. So I hope you like the video. Leave a thumbs up if you do. If you want to join me in this journey, just hit the subscribe button, and I'll talk to you in the next video. And you have a good day, and bye for now.